Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about Hard Boiled. So this review has been a long time coming. I've mentioned on this channel several times how much of a John Woo fanboy I am. In fact, I have a video that I did early in my channel where I talked about my top 5 favorite John Woo action sequences. So for anyone interested in that, I'll link it in the description below. But yeah, John Woo is just one of those filmmakers that I first discovered in high school. I was like the perfect age. I was around 16, 17 years old when I started watching his movies. And Hard Boiled was the first Hong Kong action movie that I saw of his. Of course, before that, I was familiar with Face Off and Mission Impossible 2. Was a really big fan of Face Off. Not so much of Mission Impossible 2. But yeah, you know, when you start getting into movies, and especially when you start getting into genre movies, like action movies, John Woo is one of those filmmakers that you're eventually going to come across sooner or later. And yeah, I ended up buying the double DVD pack of Hard Boiled and The Killer on eBay after I saw trailers of it on YouTube, and I played the video game Stranglehold on PS3, which is essentially a sequel to Hard Boiled, because Chow Yun-fat plays the same character, Tequila, in that game as he does in the movie, and that's kind of how I discovered John Woo. And when I saw these movies, you know, Hard Boiled being the first one, and then The Killer, and then eventually Better Tomorrow and A Better Tomorrow 2, and then Bullet in the Head, my mind was just blown. I kind of compare it to the first time I saw Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead trilogy, with, funny enough, Sam Raimi and John Woo are actually connected together because Sam Raimi was the executive producer on John Woo's first American film, Hard Target.
And really the way he approaches sequences are very different. As different as when Hitchcock first approached suspense. John Woo is to action what Hitchcock was to that.
And he was initially brought in by the producers to possibly take over direction of Hard Target if they weren't liking what John Woo was doing. They didn't have complete faith in John Woo as a filmmaker. And Sam Raimi stood up for John Woo on more than one occasion, saying, guys, this dude is a legendary action filmmaker. Trust me, just let him cook, let him do his thing, and you will not be disappointed. And I actually love Hard Target. I think it's a really underrated movie. It's probably my favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, or at least tied with Bloodsport. Absolutely love Bloodsport. But similar to Sam Raimi, the first time I saw, you know, Evil Dead 2 specifically, I was like, horror movies can be like this? They can be, there's like no rules to this type of filmmaking. And it was so energetic and exciting and unpredictable in terms of how the horror elements and the comedic elements were being mixed together. And I kind of treat John Woo's action movies like that. Like, of course, I knew what action movies were before I saw Hard Boiled, because I was obsessed with Die Hard and the Terminator movies and Predator and RoboCop and Lethal Weapon and all that good stuff. But watching Hard Boiled and only being familiar with American action movies, it's a completely different ballgame the way the action is executed in those movies. It's kind of hard to put into words. It's like you know, this has been said about John Woo several times, but it's like a bullet ballet. It's so chaotic and over the top, but there's an elegance, there's a grace to the way John Woo directs these action sequences, and it's all practical. I mean, that's Hong Kong action filmmaking. That's why there's such a huge fan base for these types of movies. It's because the way they made those movies were completely insane, and stuntmen were hurt or possibly killed on a semi-regular basis, or at least that's what it looks like with some of these stunt performers in Hong Kong action movies. And there's just a certain, like, it feels dangerous watching these movies is kind of the only way I can put it. And Hard Boiled, I mean, oh my God, the amount of action and chaos and scenes that you see in this movie, and it just leaves me going, holy shit, every time I see it. I've seen this movie, I can't even tell you how many times, and it's available to watch on Tubi. For my fans who live in the States, Tubi is a free streaming service that has ads, but you get to see the movies complete and unedited. And Hard Boiled and The Killer and A Better Tomorrow 1 and 2 are now available to stream on Tubi through Shout Factory. And that goes into why I am talking about Hard Boiled today specifically. A few months ago, there's some very exciting news that Shout Factory ended up buying the rights to not only John Woo's Hong Kong catalog of films, but something like 100 plus other Hong Kong action movies that have been lost up in this whole rights nightmare. And that's why so many of these movies were not available in the US, or you can only watch them through bootlegs. Well, now Shout Factory is going to be re-releasing these movies because they bought the rights to them, and they're going to be, updating them and putting them in 4K resolution. And so it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then on top of that, in terms of the John Woo movies, they have them available to watch for free on Tubi, and now you can buy them digitally on sites like Fandango at Home and stuff like that. So it's a really perfect time to get into these movies if you've never seen them before. So I ended up rewatching Hard Boiled, even though I own a digital copy of this in HD. I ended up watching it on Tubi. And you can watch it either dubbed or subbed. And before I gush about the technical and action aspects of this movie, let's just do a brief synopsis of the plot. So Hard Boiled centers on two cops, one undercover cop and one renegade cop who doesn't follow the rules, by the name of Tequila, played by Chow Yun-fat. And then the undercover cop is played by Tony Leung, who is known as Alan or Ah Long, depending on which translation of the film you watch. And after a arms deal gone wrong at a tea house, after a awesome shootout that opens up the movie, his partner ends up getting killed, and he ends up getting wrapped in revenge and wanting to find out who is the main villain behind all of these arms deals that have been taking over Hong Kong recently. And that's when we discover the bad guy, Johnny Wong, is the main bad guy who is distributing arms and weapons all over the city, essentially. And there's an undercover cop who is working the case, who is working alongside with Johnny Wong, Alan, and his character is basically the emotional center to this movie. As far as the story goes as a whole, it's very standard. There's nothing too original, but John Woo still puts in the time to make you care or like the characters in these movies, particularly that of Tequila and Alan. It's very reminiscent of The Killer, where in that movie, Chow Yun-fat is a assassin who ends up working alongside a police officer, and it's kind of a Michael Mann Heat situation where John Woo's trying to show you that, the bad guys and the good guys are oftentimes two sides of the same coin. This is kind of a similar version of that, with the exception of these two cops are both cops, but one is undercover and has to do all these really nasty, shady things in order to do his job, and the other one, doesn't really play by the rules, and they have to end up working together as a result. And Tony Leung is one of my favorite actors ever. I absolutely love his work with Wong Kar-wai, specifically films like Chungking Express, In the Mood for Love, and 2046, which is my personal favorite. I absolutely love those movies. But his performance and the type of character he plays in this movie is pretty much the same version of another character he'd play later after Hard Boiled in the film Infernal Affairs, which is a movie that would end up being remade by Martin Scorsese as The Departed. He plays the Leonardo DiCaprio role of a undercover cop who's being tormented and kind of losing his self of identity and morality while being an undercover cop and being forced to do all this heinous, evil shit, essentially. His character's basically the same like that in Hard Boiled. And so it's really interesting to see how his character plays out. And Tony Leung gives such a phenomenal performance. He's the best actor I've seen in terms of portraying quiet intensity. He does it through really subtle physical acting that is really unmatched, in my opinion. And then, of course, you got Chow Yun-fat, who, there's no coincidence that pretty much every great John Woo movie has Chow Yun-fat in it. He just elevates it to another level. He's just effortless in how cool he is, and he has a swagger that isn't forced, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like it's his X factor. It's who he is. It's that charm, and that is just so awesome. And when he turns it on and becomes a super awesome badass, you buy into it completely. So that's why I absolutely love A Better Tomorrow and The Killer and Hard Boiled. But of course, what makes this movie so legendary and why it's so highly regarded by action fans is because of the action sequences. I mean, it's no joke. The first half of this movie plays like a really awesome standard crime action drama. And then by the time we get to the second half of this movie, it essentially turns into a siege film similar to that of Die Hard, where it takes place, the entire last half of this movie takes place in a hospital, because we find out that Johnny Wong has a arms cache that has been built underneath the hospital. I mean, this movie is like all John Woo movies. It's very over the top. It's not based in reality in any way, shape, or form, but that just adds to the entertainment value overall. And so both Tequila and Alan have to work together to get everybody out of the hospital. There's a whole sequence where Tequila and his girlfriend have to save babies. They have to get the babies out of the hospital because everyone's getting shot up and it's about to get blown up and all this stuff. And oh my God, that entire action set piece is seriously one of the greatest action set pieces in movie history. Like, it really is that impressive. And of course, there's that one extremely famous and influential scene where it's a 3-minute shot take of Tequila and Alan, you know, checking corridors and shooting bad guys, and they do it in one long take. Of course, there's a hidden cut. I know where the cut is now. I've seen this movie so many times. It's the scene where Alan accidentally shoots a cop. The camera cuts right there. Then they go into the elevator. And fun fact, when they're in the elevator, John Woo and his crew have to clean up that set, and then when the doors open, they're in the same room. So it's incredibly impressive how they were able to execute such an ambitious action scene, especially for the time in 1992. That was not a common way to do action sequences. And that's just how John Woo operates. He was just so far above every other action filmmaker in the world at that point. He really was the apex of the action genre, and Hard Boiled is kind of his masterpiece in terms of bombastic action. Of course, there's also the warehouse shootout where the bad guys are on motorcycles and they're shooting everybody up, and then Tequila ends up going in there. One of my favorite scenes is when he shoots a guy off a dirt bike, and then he jumps over the bike and shoots another guy in midair on a bike, exploding it. Like, there's so many guys jumping in the air, shooting 2 guns at the same time. I mean, and of course that would go on to influence pretty much everything in action movies after that, from movies like, you know, Desperado, which is essentially a John Woo fan film made by Robert Rodriguez, which is a film that I absolutely love. The Matrix, of course, the famous lobby shootout is very much in the vein of John Woo. And then video games like Max Payne, which directly references Chow Yun-Fat in that game.
Got me derailed. I made like Chow Yun-Fat.
I mean, is a love letter to the specific style of action that John Woo essentially created. No one did action sequences like John Woo. He was kind of the first one to do it, starting with A Better Tomorrow, and then he would really perfect it with Hard Boiled. And I personally cannot wait for the physical copies of these films to come out by Shout Factory in 4K. That hasn't been announced yet. But clearly they're coming, and I can't wait. But yeah, I just had to talk about Hard Boiled. One of the most important, influential, and amazing action movies of all time. Still one of my very personal favorite movies. It helped ignite my love for genre movies in particular. And so, yeah, that's my thoughts on Hard Boiled, but I would love to hear from you guys. For those who have seen this movie, what are your thoughts on it? Is it your favorite John Woo movie? What is your favorite John Woo movie? Mention it in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.